Look at her. She thinks she's a businesswoman now just because she travels for work. My brother laughed, tossing a peanut into his mouth like he owned the place. Dad smirked. She can't even manage her own life and she's out there managing deals. Mom added softly, at least your brother is responsible, even if he's in a bit of debt. A bit. $216,000 wasn't a bit. But that's how they always minimized his chaos and magnified my success into arrogance. That day their laughter carried through the phone while I sat alone in a hotel room in Seoul, staring at the city lights reflected in the window. Something inside me cracked quietly like glass under pressure. Hi everyone, my name is Lena Quinn and I'm 32. I've always believed silence is stronger than screaming. It echoes longer. Have you ever built something with every ounce of your being, only to have it stolen by the people who called it family? While I was finalizing a $1 million contract overseas, my phone pinged, property transferred successfully. I blinked at the screen, confused. My property? Within seconds my heart sank. It was my house. The one I bought at 27 after years of saving, working 2 jobs, skipping vacations, skipping birthdays. When I called home, Dad's tone was casual. Oh we sold it. Your brother needed help and family comes first. Don't act ungrateful. Ungrateful. I whispered. You're unmarried, Lena, he said. You live wherever you go next anyway. Your brother has a wife, a future. You'll understand someday. They didn't even hesitate. Didn't even think to tell me first. When I returned a week later, the house keys felt cold in my hand, useless. My home now belonged to a stranger. My photos were gone. My curtains replaced. And there they were, standing in the driveway, grinning. Tao, you're homeless, my brother sneered. I just smiled. Dad frowned. What's so funny? I looked at the sold sign, the papers still fluttering in my hand like wings ready to turn the story. And I whispered, that house you sold was actually the one registered under my company's name. The smirk faded from Dad's face instantly. What do you mean your company's name? He stammered. I watched his expression shift, arrogance melting into confusion. When I started my consulting firm 5 years ago, I'd quietly transferred all my major assets, including the house, into its legal ownership for tax protection. The documents were buried under corporate filings only I had access to. So yes, technically they'd sold my company's property, not mine. That meant every signature they'd given was fraudulent. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I simply walked past them, heels tapping against the driveway like a metronome of karma, and said, you should probably hire a lawyer before the company does. That night I sat in a rented apartment downtown, the city lights spilling across the floor like gold dust. My chest hurt, not from losing the house, but from realizing they hadn't even hesitated to betray me. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from Mom, then a message. Lena, please call back. The man we sold to just came by with police papers. I let the phone rest on the table, watching it vibrate silently, like a dying heartbeat. By morning the family group chat was chaos. Dad blaming the broker. My brother threatening to sue him. Mom crying emojis. And me quiet. Because silence once again said everything. Later that week I met the buyer myself. An older woman, polite but shrewd. She'd already discovered the irregular ownership structure and didn't want trouble. I'll withdraw my purchase claim, she told me gently. You seem like someone who's been wronged enough. I thanked her, but my mind was elsewhere. Because it wasn't about the house anymore. It was about trust. And trust once sold could never be bought back. 3 days later I went back home, not to argue but to observe. They were sitting in the living room, the same one where they used to mock my long work nights and call me cold for choosing career over family dinners. Dad started first. You humiliated us, Lena. The whole neighborhood knows now. The police came here because of you. I tilted my head. Because of me, or because you sold something that wasn't yours? He slammed his hand on the table. You don't talk to your father like that. But his authority no longer scared me. Not after realizing how easily they could strip me of everything I'd built, and then act like I was the problem. My brother avoided eye contact, scrolling nervously through his phone. Do you know, I said softly, how many years I spent paying that mortgage? How many times I wired money home when you gambled yours away? He scoffed. You make money easy, sis. You travel, stay in hotels. It's not real life. That line hit harder than I expected. To him, my discipline looked like luck. My sacrifices looked like luxury. Mom stood in the corner, pretending to tidy up the already clean shelf. We just thought you wouldn't mind. You always say money doesn't matter. I looked at her, tears threatening to break through but stopping halfway. I said that when I thought I mattered more than money to you. Silence spread like smoke. Finally, I placed a brown envelope on the table. These are the corporate fraud papers. The company's legal team will proceed unless I sign to stop them. Dad's voice cracked. You wouldn't. I smiled faintly. I already did worse. I believed you once. When I left, the envelope still lay unopened. The door clicked shut behind me, softer than a goodbye but louder than forgiveness. That night I couldn't sleep. The city hummed below my apartment window. Cars, sirens, a dog barking somewhere far away. All that sound, and yet inside me only silence. I replayed everything. The phone call from Dad. The laughter. The way my brother smirked when he said, "Now you're homeless." That word, homeless, echoed like a curse. Not because I had nowhere to go but because they'd meant it to hurt. I stared at the faint reflection of myself in the window glass. Same woman, same face, yet somehow, not the same daughter. The next morning I called my lawyer, Sarah, my closest friend from grad school. She knew my family's patterns too well. When I told her what happened, she sighed. You don't need revenge, Lena. You need clarity. Sometimes, I whispered, clarity is revenge. She helped me file the official fraud report but placed it on hold. I wanted them to feel the weight first, not the sentence. 3 days later, Dad showed up at my office. The same man who once called my company a childish hobby now stood in the lobby, wringing his hat like a man lost in a storm. Lena, please, he started, voice trembling. Your mother hasn't slept. Your brother's losing his job. They're saying the police might. I cut him off gently. Did you come to apologize or to fix your image? He looked down. You're still my daughter. And you were supposed to be my father. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was empty. He finally said, tell me what to do. I leaned back in my chair. You taught me that family comes first, remember? So go pay his debts again. But this time you'll use your own name. He flinched, realizing I'd already made my move. Because that very morning I had sent copies of the documents, not to the police, but to the bank manager handling the fraudulent transaction. Their accounts were frozen by noon. And for the first time my silence felt like justice. By the end of that week, news had spread, quietly, efficiently, the way guilt does when it runs out of places to hide. My brother called first. You froze our accounts? How could you do that to family? I took a breath. You sold my house. How could you do that to family? He tried to play victim, his voice shaking. I didn't think you'd take it this far. That's the problem, I said calmly. You never think, you just take. He hung up. But I knew it wasn't over. That evening I went back to the house one last time. The front gate was open, wind carrying the faint sound of my mother crying inside. For a moment I almost softened, until I saw the living room. My brother packing electronics, gold bangles, even framed photos. You're looting what's left now? I asked quietly. He turned sharply. You can't prove anything. The house isn't yours anymore. I smiled faintly. That's the funny thing. You're still stealing from me even when I've already taken everything back. He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. Because he couldn't grasp it, that real power wasn't in shouting or suing. It was in standing there, calm, while everything they'd built on lies collapsed under its own weight. A week later, the bank officially reverted ownership of the property to my company. Every fraudulent transaction Dad and my brother signed was nullified. Their debts, however, remained, now amplified by legal fees and penalties. Mom came to my office the next day. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling. Lena, she whispered, we made a mistake. Your father's heart, he's been sick. I looked up, steady. So is mine. You just didn't see it. As she left, I felt the ache of both justice and loss. Realizing that even when you win, family betrayal never really feels like victory. It feels like standing in the ruins of a house you once called home, knowing you'll never step inside the same way again. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us became permanent. A cold, invisible wall stretching through the air. Dad stopped calling. My brother sent only one message. You destroyed this family. I didn't reply, but I reread it more than I should have. Because somewhere deep inside it hurt. Not because I wanted their approval, I'd stopped chasing that years ago. But because I had spent my whole life believing that love could survive betrayal if you just gave enough. Now I knew better. At work, I buried myself in projects. The company thrived. Clients respected me. But at night, when the emails stopped, I'd sit alone with a cup of tea, staring at the empty chair across the table. That chair used to be for Sunday dinners, for laughter that wasn't tainted by guilt. One evening, Sarah came by with takeout. "You look like someone who hasn't exhaled in a month," she teased. I smiled weakly. "It's strange. I got justice, but it doesn't feel like victory." "That's because you're human, Lena," she said softly. "Justice fixes things on paper, not in the heart." Her words stayed with me. The next morning, I visited Dad's old workshop behind the house. It smelled of sawdust and oil, the scent of my childhood. His tools still hung neatly on the wall. In the corner, I found something I didn't expect. A small box labeled with my name. Inside were receipts from the first loan he'd ever taken for me. College tuition, notebooks, rent. All those years he'd helped me quietly and I'd forgotten. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Why couldn't you just love me without conditions?" I locked the workshop behind me, carrying the box like a secret reminder. Even villains in our stories once built us with love before they broke us. And maybe forgiveness wasn't about letting them back in. Maybe it was just about letting yourself breathe again. The next few days felt like living in two worlds. One where I was the composed CEO signing contracts, and another where I was just a daughter trying to understand where love had gone wrong. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with shaky handwriting I instantly recognized. My father's. For a moment I couldn't open it. My hands trembled as though the paper carried the weight of every unspoken word between us. "Lena, if you're reading this, I know I've already lost the right to explain. I sold your house not because I didn't love you, but because I thought saving your brother would somehow save this family. I was wrong. You were right to protect what you built. You've always been the strong one. I just wish I'd told you that when it mattered. Dad." I folded the letter carefully, letting the tears fall this time. There was no apology that could undo what he did, but those words, they sounded human again. Not proud, not cruel. Just small. That evening I drove back to the house. The gates were locked now, the sold sign gone. I stood outside as dusk painted the walls gold. It didn't feel like my home anymore, but it didn't feel like theirs either. It was something in between, a monument of everything lost in translation between love and control. My brother pulled up in his car, eyes red, voice cracking. "They took everything, Lena. I don't even know where to start." I looked at him quietly. "Start with yourself. For once, don't expect someone else to fix it." He nodded weakly, maybe realizing I wasn't his enemy, just the mirror he'd been avoiding. As I walked away, the streetlight flickered, a small, silent heartbeat in the dark. I realized I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't need to. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's distance. A month later, life had returned to a quiet rhythm. My mornings began with coffee, not chaos. The phone no longer rang with demands or guilt, only clients, friends, and silence. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore. Then one evening I received a call from the bank manager. "Miss Quinn, we've completed the reversal process. The house is now legally under your company again." For a moment I just stared at the skyline from my office window, the city lights shimmering like little reminders that even darkness has purpose. But instead of celebrating, I whispered, "Sell it." He paused. "Sell it?" "Yes," I said softly. "Some things aren't meant to be reclaimed, just released." That weekend I visited one last time. The house was empty. No laughter, no footsteps, no resentment. Just echoes. I walked through each room. My old study, the kitchen where Mom used to hum, the porch where Dad once taught me how to fix a chair. Every corner carried a ghost of who we used to be. I left the letter Dad wrote me on the kitchen counter and closed the door behind me. The sound of the latch clicking felt final, like punctuation on a story that had taken too long to end. Outside, the air was cool, the kind that feels like forgiveness. I didn't forgive them entirely, but I forgave myself for holding on so long. A week later, the property sold for twice its original price. I donated half the profit to a women's housing fund, because if my family tried to make me homeless, I'd make sure another woman never felt that word the same way. As I walked away from the notary office, I passed by a mirror in the lobby. My reflection met my eyes. Calm, steady, untouchable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel broken or betrayed. I just felt done. Because closure doesn't always come with tears or apologies. Sometimes it comes with silence, paperwork, and peace.